Welcome to 5-Minute Lessons for Nonprofits. I'm Mike Gellman. Today, we're going to talk about cash management target policies for operating and intermediate cash funds. We're first going to start talking about some benefit tactics and strategies. These are really important to me. In no particular order, we have an augmentation that having good policies in place for short and intermediate cash funds really will augment and enhance internal controls. There are many benefits, as you'll see as we go through these. The second benefit will be it'll boost overall cash management. And my favorite one, the enhancements here to perception that we are a well-managed organization, that we have thoughtful systems, and we're taking a practical approach will help people have confidence and trust, as we talk about with a lot of our topics. The key concepts here are bucketing the funds, a stratification system. We're going to be talking about the first two buckets here today, short operating funds and then intermediate funds, and how those two are paired together. They will be sitting behind, if you have a long-term investment pool, and then some organizations will have special purpose funds pools that they might want to consider. So let's go ahead and talk about our focus here today, which is the short operating funds and the intermediate funds. The operating funds, very straightforward. It's your business checking accounts. It's your everyday funds that you're using. You tie that back into your budgets, and you're going to be setting ultimately min-max targets, as you'll see out to the right. Before we go into the details, let's talk about the intermediate funds, which will be sitting right behind it. And the purpose of that is to provide funds that we don't need in our checking account right away, but they're sitting there ready to use, but are not eligible for long-term investment vehicles. Two things that go in here. We're going to talk about min-max targets, and we're going to talk about safety, liquidity, and rate of return as we go through these. They change for each of these buckets. So short operating funds, we understand what the purpose is. It's there. My key point I want to take a second on, is very important to me, is that funds are least safe in our checking accounts. They are highly exposed. The balances constantly change. And we can't monitor them. So they're safer by keeping less in them. And by having this intermediate bucket sitting behind them, we're able to not let excess funds build up in there. So our highlighted here is safety. Liquidity, of course, checking account is completely liquid. And our rate of return is almost non-existent. The key with this bucket for these checking accounts is establishing thoughtful min, max, and target balances. So using a typical small, mid-sized organizations will keep 1 to 2 months in here for a $1.2 million budget. That's $100,000 a month burn rate. We'll keep $100,000 at the min level, $200,000 at the max level, target balance rate in between 45 days, $150,000. As you get into larger organizations, the number of days shrink just because of the size of the dollars, and it becomes more efficient and worthwhile to move the funds around with larger dollars. Next, let's move to our intermediate funds. The purpose broadens out here in that this now has a dual purpose to support the checking and our operating intermediate funds. But also, if these funds start to build up, they could transfer funds up into the long-term funds pool. And think of again as the buckets overflowing. Okay. Here, liquidity moves slightly ahead of safety because we are able to use vehicles that have a longer term in nature, certificate of deposit, money market, but really any fixed income fund that's not market sensitive could be used. The min-max targets broaden out. And here is where you get some flexibility. Oftentimes we'll start in that 2 to 4 months, and I'll come back to that, or it could be 2 to 6 months. And that it's just a matter of how much of a buffer zone is comfortable for your organization. Usually when we establish these for the first time, we will start with that min point and establish at 2, but the long-term bucket, we will go up to the higher one because we can always pare it back as we get comfortable with it. The target balance will be in the middle. The last concept, just want to spend a couple seconds here on, is that a great place to park this cash, the intermediate and short cash management, is in the IPS, the investment policy statement. Even though the investment policy statement is highly focused on long-term investments, and there's a lot of complications in that, I like a definition on the first page that shows what we're putting in our short term, what we're putting in our intermediate term. And it makes the long-term investment committee and the board feel more comfortable that we've filled the first two buckets. So a couple wrap up things. this is very important. I think sometimes we don't focus on it because of the simplicity of it, but it has a lot of benefits to the organization. So take a hard look at the buckets. So that's it for today. We encourage you to go check out the website, SE4nonprofits.com, for more information, and we'll see you next time.